I'm Sandy from Reboot the Future, and we really wanted to share the PACTS project with you today in this session. There we go. We have slides. Thank you, George. Fantastic. The image that you're seeing there is the launch of PACTS, which stands for Politicians Accountable for Climate to Students. We had a fantastic launch event at Google Academy in October. And you'll spot a few familiar faces in there. But two I'd particularly like to highlight in terms of the creation of PACTS are Anne, who is behind the green dot, and Lord Jim Knight, who's at the front there, who inspired the idea of PACTS. And it really comes down to, or it kind of kicked off in that this has been such a big year for elections all across the world. I think I Googled 64 countries that went to the polls this year. And there's been so much going on in terms of, wondering how this is going to change decision making across the world. And in our country, we're lucky enough to be able to have a say. Um, if we're 18 and above. But we've been thinking about those under 18 and how can have a voice in the issues that are affecting particularly climate decisions in our country. Um, and thus, with the idea of contacting MPs to have a voice by Anne and Jim, PACTS was born. So next slide, please, George. We'll be able to share all of these slides afterwards to give you more information about PACTS. It's really about connecting students with their MPs on climate issues. That children have tried to have a voice in so many other ways. If we look at from 2018 onwards with climate strikes, but really we're wanting to look at how classrooms can become hubs for students being able to have a voice on climate issues. Um, and we wanted to take it further than just a letter writing exercise. We wanted students to be able to really have a relationship with their local MP on local issues. PACS was born as something that has a unique thread to it, that it involves making a relationship and meeting with MPs, but also that it's ongoing. That it's really about this pact, that an agreement on actions to be taken and then reviewing that action so that it's students and schools having a relationship with MPs over time through local environmental issues. Can we have the next slide, George? Um, I mentioned that we had a launch for PACTS at the Google Academy in October. And a fantastic group of students, I think, says what I really wanted to be able to say in terms of students not feeling that they have a voice on some of these issues. And I just have a short video I'd like to share with you from New College Leicester on their voices to what they'd like to see happen. Well done, George. Great.
As young people, we aren't able to make big decisions in what happens in Parliament, which is why we rely on adults to push for the changes we need.
Climate change is having major impacts on many young people's mental health, with many facing anxiety about the what-ifs resulting from it.
This makes us to think of how we can work together with the politicians to ensure environmental security.
It is vital that we educate students, as without knowledge, there is weaker action.
Climate movement is not only about protecting the planet, it is primarily about caring for the people who live on this planet.
We want you to understand the importance of tackling climate change so we can have a better and greener future for everyone.
Planting together, learning together to make sure that people can see that nature and plants are connected.
Justice is needed not only for the endangered, but also for the future generations who have to deal with the consequences of our actions.
We hope you enjoy our presentation and we wish we could be there. Thank you.
Great. And I loved what they put together with Keir Starmer being in attendance for the video and Big Ben. But I think it really goes to show, the the concern that kids have, and that and they're really wanting a voice on these issues. So the next slide is the five to really kind of explain what PACTS is. We're talking about it being an initiative to connect MPs and students, but really it's a five-step process with lots of different resources in terms of how you can take this action. So schools join up to the PACTS program through the Our Shared World website, which we're very grateful to them for hosting. And it starts with them by identifying their local climate issues. Step two is then thinking about the actions that they can take, that they'll be taking their concerns and their actions to their MP. Then finding out about their MP and more about the process of the role of an MP and how speaking to them can help give voice to them. It's then contacting their MP, and step five is building a relationship with the MP. And there's new materials in the resources on, how can you have a good conversation, particularly about issues that you think that you may hold different and opposing points on. And six is this loop that I mentioned around holding your account to the MP with their promises over time. So actually kind of building a relationship with an MP, inviting them back to be able to talk through those issues and look at and kind of track change that's being made. Thanks, George. Next slide. So our roadmap for PACTS, we've had our launch in October, which was exciting and involved a number of different schools from around the country. So made real efforts to come to launch PACTS. And again, we can share this slide with you, but we're looking at various initiatives with Seed, Harmony, and Reboot together, supported by Our Shared World to support teachers in doing this work. We are planning various in-person events. And also a big event at the end of the academic year. We're looking at some exciting places to hold that for people who have really got involved in PACTS. But what we're really wanting some support with is to get this into schools. And as well as our newsletters and reports, we really want to help teachers really kind of bring this into schools and support them along the way with it. So a final slide to get you all thinking is is our call to action, really, that we're really excited about talking to schools about PACS and how they can get involved, but we're looking for others who can support, and as an audience we're hoping to talk about this with you. Bruna, who's head of comms and marketing from Reboot, is going to put a couple of links in the chat with the sign up for PACTS and also a partner pack to help you think about how you might be able to take this into school. So it's a really exciting initiative that brings voice to students, and hopefully a real sense of empowerment over issues that people might be feeling that they don't have a lot of control over at the moment. So we feel it's a really positive way for students to be able to, and schools to be able to take action. So I'm going to hand back to all of you, as this is a wonderful opportunity for us to kind of be in conversation as to how we can support schools with initiatives like this. Thank you.
So Richard is on the road between two farms. So I'll go first and then hopefully Richard can join us. Why, when Jim Knight said this to me, we got excited, to be honest, was because we felt that this was a very different initiative. This is not just a letter writing activity that often happens at last year in primary. This was actually about engagement and citizenship, and this idea that you may not have a vote as a young person, but you have a voice and you have some impact. And the second part that we think schools would really like is the fact that it's a way for those young people not just to feel that they can engage in a different way in sustainability and climate change, and it's giving them a little bit beyond the idea of campaigning or Fridays for the Future, is actually saying, well, now you can engage, which we think is a very positive thing. But for us, it's also about that sense of well-being, and almost all of the teachers, and I'm sure you've all had this experience as well, is that it is a worry for teachers right now. knowing how young people feel, because all the research and all the surveys say this. There are a number of ways of engaging. We don't think we're the only one, but because of our shared world with 360 members, well, organizations and individuals who participate in things, and 175 organizations have signed up. And if you haven't signed up, please do. Um, and that gives us an enormous, powerful voice in terms of what in our shared world we thought about as a social movement. And this is what this is a social movement. And the more that we can actually directly, and so far, we've shown that the best way is to directly contact schools, ones that we've got a relationship with. So focus on the schools that you've got a relationship with. And then and the thing we learned in the social movement is that our shared world will hold the comms so that we can actually then promote it even further and further and further. And that's basically the model behind this. Richard, is there anything you want to add to that?
Thank you, Anne. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm on
Yep.
a road in the sleet and snow. I think the only thing I'd like to add is, we want to engage with it, as Anne has said, as many organizations as possible, but particularly around how to make it happen. What is it in schools that is going to actually catalyze this so that they do something about it? Is it an assembly? Is it a particular subject area that is a good way in? So what are the best ways to bring those conversations alive and bring the MPs into dialogue with students? Did you
Great.
hear that?
We did. Thank you. Absolutely. And it will be different from different schools. And the other
Yeah,
thing, I'm very conscious that we've got some very creative people online today. And it may well be that there are different creative ways of doing this as well. And I'm not looking at you, Deborah, but I am looking at you, Deborah, because I think that, the idea is that people will do this in lots of different ways. And recording that and helping other people see how to do it will be great.
yeah.
So, um, we don't have Anthony here, but I'm sure he would say probably quite a lot of what Kathy's already said, and it is exciting. We're going to have, first of all, Kathy, this is over to you, the Q&A and general discussion.
Yeah, that's great, and thank you. So one of the main points about the learning lunches is really to give us a space where people can talk together about what they're doing. So this part of the session is really to ask you to get together. George is going to be busily making the breakout rooms, I hope, as I'm speaking. But we want really for you to think about how best you can support getting PACTS into schools. So what we're going to do is put you into breakout rooms and give you around sort of 8 to 10 minutes to discuss that. And then we'll bring you back into the main room and you can share some of those ideas with us. So what are you doing already to support getting PACTS into schools? And also, as Anne's just mentioned, have you got any ideas of how of other ideas that we may have missed, or other suggestions that could really help move this forward? Welcome back. Well, I think we've got a few more people that are due back. Well, it'd be lovely to hear back some of the ideas. I know that the group that I popped into was really rich with discussion. So I might just quickly call on Richard to feed those back if you're there. That would be great.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, I'm coming at it from a local authority perspective, and trying to think about it from a kind of that strategic point of view. I made the point in our group that we sometimes as a local authority have to be careful about involving politicians, perhaps more so than a school would, because for a school it's easier to work directly with their local MP, whoever that is. We've got this interesting level of MPs perhaps being from different parties from the parties that are overseeing our local authority. So that sometimes causes us a few headaches as officers. But that aside, I was suggesting about at a local authority level, we have a PSHE network, which has citizenship included. That's an obvious route through to engage with lots of teachers that way. We also have a county-wide youth council, which is part of the National Youth Parliament structure, which is run this year by the National Youth Agency. They're an obvious group of young people who are interested and have got reach out to to engage with schools and wider groups of young people. And I also talked about regional mayors and the mayoral combined authorities as a structure to get information out to lots of schools. Although they don't tend to not have an education brief, they do engage with schools and education around skills and lots of other stuff. So there's obvious connections there. And then Ashton was mentioning that from her point of view, she's connected into it's a Catholic movement working across England and Wales. So lots of opportunities there and potential to connect into the peace activity work that she's doing. And then Bruce was mentioning more from his point of view as somebody working very closely, working directly with family members and grandchildren and so on, and how that might connect. So I think it's interesting that whatever level we are thinking about, whether it be at a really big level or working very closely with an individual school, all of us saw potential.
That's great. Can I go next, Kathy?
Yes, please do, Anne. That'd be
So,
great.
so Richard, the event in London, the launch event, we did actually have elected members from a local authority. So I think there's no problem. I mean, because it came from Jim, it's all about MPs. But actually, often the elected members at a local level have got more to say. We had an interesting list of, and I didn't write it down, Mark. So could you actually go through that list of people that you thought we could connect with? And then Deborah had a couple too.
Yeah, so I was thinking STEMnet, who run the STEM Ambassadors scheme.
Yep.
Primary Science Teaching Trust, we have quite a lot of contacts there. Geographical Association and Royal Geographical Society.
Yep.
And then also in some areas, the local councils, so the areas where our sites are, we've got good contacts with the local councils in those areas as well.
Great. Good. Thank you. And Deborah, you had a couple of ideas as well.
I mean, I think it's really that I think events like whether it's an online or a in-person event is a good thing, like because it kind of focuses everybody's mind on what it might be that people are discussing. And I think that I would like to see more collaboration between young people from different networks and different areas. So it's more kind of bottom up approaches, and I can sort of see how the program that I'm going to be running the next few months can weave this thinking into the program, and looking at how maybe those young people could be invited to be on some kind of Zoom session with young people from other networks that are on here, so that we can do more kind of links between regions, which I think might actually kind of get young people to feel that they're in this bigger movement.
I think that's a lovely idea. Sorry, just jump in. I think that's such a lovely idea to connect different networks and different groups.
I think the power is in feeling that it's not just you doing it, or not just your school doing it, or not just your region doing it, but that it's happening everywhere. And then the bravery and the kind of the sense of purpose is just more in possibility, isn't it?
Yeah. That is the plan. It could take a while, and then once it takes off, these things can happen very fast. But there's a lot of work getting it to that point. We've struggled to get a Zoom time for a number of schools to all share, but I think so. Richard, who's not here, I don't think anymore, he had an idea that we could actually have a like a PACTS week where we actually book times in and get people to do things. So he was thinking about spring. Does that sound like a good idea? What do people think about that?
I think in my experience, if you give people a choice of this, or this, they're more likely to go this rather than would you come to a Zoom call, in which case when?
Yeah.
So it is just about kind of us saying
there
are these three options at different times. And so whatever works with your class.
Yeah. Great.
I mean, we're about to experience what it's like to do that, but I think it can be very powerful to have those kind of whiteboards actually used in that way. Because like then the whole class becomes like a breakout room.
It does. The third group, Kathy.
Yeah, so we had Daria and Les and Sandy. I don't know if anyone from that group wants to feedback a little bit.
I can do that. We had Louise, who's left us now. Louise, as a former head teacher, was talking about the value of bringing schools together rather than creating relationships with MPs with individual schools. And I was sharing from a Brighton perspective, and I know that Sandy's already kind of plugged into this, but our experience pre-PACTS of bringing our three city MPs together with a whole group of secondary schools across the city over a sort of 1.5 year period, and I've put the link in the chat to some of the trailers and the recordings that we made of that. And there's a lot of learning, I think, from that process of both how we kept the MPs engaged, how that did become a bit trickier over time, because they like new things, and when you keep inviting them back to the same space, it's less enticing. But we managed to sustain it for 3 sessions. But also actually the sort of planning underneath it, the collaboration between the person who leads our kind of city sustainability program, people within these, the sort of PSHE leads within the authority, links to schools, and actually having somebody independent who was offering us pro bono support to sort of drive and actually make things happen and do the follow up with the MP's offices to pin them down to dates. So Sandy and I are going to talk separately about some of that process stuff, because I think in the detail of actually making stuff happen is where it can get a bit tricky. But maybe we've got something that we can offer in terms of, just sort of on a very basic planning document type level.
That's brilliant, Les. I think that those are really, really valuable things that we can definitely learn from and build in. I'm a little mindful of time because we promised it would just be half an hour. So I'm going to hand over to Anne for just the last few words really on how to get involved. So Anne, over to you.
Great, thank you. So as we've said, um, there's the pack for organizations like yourselves to use. We've made it as simple as possible, and there's even a template for a letter if schools are struggling with it. I very much do like the idea of bringing schools together in groups, certainly around events, and I think that was the success of the reboot driving the launch in London. But I'm thinking that many of us have access to sites or locations where we could bring some schools together. And for some of the schools, it was only sort of 3 or 4 kids. But do make sure that the 9-year-old who really wants to speak gets their chance. Because Ahmed, I think, would have cried if he hadn't spoken. So I think that's important. The other thing I think is important that is that there are people who might want to help you. So, so thank you for that idea about pro bono, Les, and other people. Maybe there are people in universities or even the youth groups who might be very keen to help get to the schools and encourage the schools to do this. So it's not always because many of you will be very busy with your own work, but who else is there? And you could give a call out on Our Shared World or to anyone else really. Are there people in local universities or whatever who'd be willing to help volunteer and support this to drive it into the schools and support the schools who might think it's more complicated than it actually is. But thank you everyone for that, because that was a great discussion. Lots of good ideas about networks and people that we can use, and we'll be following up, I think.
And thank you very much, everyone, for your time, for giving up your lunchtime and coming along and sharing all those things with us. The last thing to mention is we do have our next learning lunch is on the 10th of December. And we have, I'm not quite sure if it's going to be Tom Crompton or Ruth Taylor, or both, coming from the Common Cause Foundation to share with us a lot of their work on values. So that would be something really, really exciting to look forward to. And if you have any questions or anything, any burning suggestions that you haven't had time for, it's a very swift session. Do please get in touch with George or with Anne or any of us and ask for further help.
Can I just mention one thing?
You
Friday,
can.
Friday is the last day for submitting to the curriculum and assessment review. And they what they're doing is there are two things you need to remember now, that your practice is evidence. So whatever practice you are doing, you can submit it. And the Sustainability and Climate Change team really want all of us to submit. So Friday is the deadline. And the second thing is they are using all of those submissions to identify themes, and we're hoping sustainability will be one of them if enough of us write in. So they're trying to find themes, and they will then investigate those themes in more detail. So that's quite good news. And if you haven't seen it yet, go to SOS or Quinn Runkle or Jamie Ogomba to see what's happened at COP29 and what the British government has committed to today. It's great news.
That's great. Thank you very much, everyone, and look forward to seeing you at the next Learning Lunch. Many thanks for coming.